Today I'm drawing Genos from One Punch Man. Genos is a really interesting character because he continues anatomy with mechanical design. Excuse me. He combines anatomy with mechanical design, aka you could also kind of like say that that's a thing with any type of like cyborg character where or robot, right? Where you might be drawing in, let's say they have the anatomy of a human, but instead of having human limbs or human body parts, they might have robot body parts. So how that would be constructed is obviously based upon the way the creator of that art decided the machinery should look like. So, how did they decide that a robot should be constructed? Is it simple? Is it advanced? Is there where are the metal slates? Where the you know how is it constructed? Like, is there wires? Is there ball joints or whatever? Is there armor placed? Insert? Who knows, right? But Genos has his own, right? Um. Okay. So the first thing I'm doing is establishing the gesture and overall action of the pose. Obviously with the stick figure and ball joints and then muscles over that, and then so starting with the ear, then drawing into some of the hair, some of the neck, and then building up into the rest of the head, and then or and across the face, and then into the rest of the body, neck, shoulder, chest areas. One of his hands extending forward, so that's when I finally land there. Um, at the okay, so the first thing I did say this, but I'll just say it again, just so I can re-say that, and then if I need to add anything on, and then continue. So the first thing I'm doing is establishing the gesture and overall action of the pose. The gesture is like him like reaching forward or him lunging forward, right? I didn't have the legs, but if I had drawn this on a smaller scale, so I could have added the legs, and that would have clearly shown that that's the exact pose, but it's only the upper body part of it, right? Or like leaping forward and reaching forward, like as if he's reaching to grab onto a ledge and pull himself up, or if he's reaching to grab somebody or whatever. Um, or like a tackle, but like a one arm tackle, right? Um, Strong poses create strong drawings. At this stage, I'm only focusing on large shapes and proportions. Obviously, starting with the stick figure, ball joints, the muscle drawn over it, or aka where the muscle placement would have been to like a very bland extent, and then things over it. Some of the details I'm already doing, but most of the details I come back and do after I finished a lot of more of that area. Probably it's a blend in between both of those, right? What in that was kind of like not, it wasn't unnecessary, but it's just me narrating. But one thing I'll add on real quick is the reason I do that is that's something that helps me stay in proportion. So like if I try to do one specific area and all the details, and mind you, I'm doing this in pen, so I can't erase. If I do that and then let's say I do an area in details and then I go into another area and I just immediately start doing the details, one thing I did find is that if I keep doing that too much and not at least building out the general areas before I even get there to an extent. So like let's say like I'm inching out and slowly building out the drawing from like the ear, for example, right? After I get the skeleton in. If I keep trying to do too many details in each area before I even get to like outer areas. So like every time I branch out a little bit into more of an area, I obviously get the general area, then I might get some details, and then I'll slowly branch out more, and then the outer area details. But if I keep doing all the concentrated details of every little part I do, I might run into something concerning the proportions being off a lot sooner because of that. Because what happens is as I'm building the outer areas, it's not puzzle piecing back to the detailed areas that might have to align up somewhere with. So there's detail areas I already did, and then there's areas I haven't detailed yet. And if I uh, build out too much concentrated details in areas that were near the start, and I start to try and branch that back, what happens is like the details might not puzzle piece together. I'm not able to bridge the gap as well because I could have slowly built everything out and kept it even, and then even got evenly built out the details, which would have prevented me having to puzzle piece small little details at the end. No, I could just easily connect them as the blander structure or the structure without the details is already built, and the gap was already bridged between the outer structure, less details, before I even got to the details. So the details was easier to bridge the gap with as well. So bridging the gap with the simple stuff before bridging the gap with the extra detailed, highly complicated stuff on top. Because remember, that stuff is always going to be on top. You can always just draw that stuff on top, especially when you have you understand exactly where it needs to be because you already have the structure under it. So that's why, that's like a repeat thing I'll keep saying. And that's been a curl pit of anytime things were out of proportion. It was literally could have very highly likely had to do with something like that, as especially even as I'm getting better at drawing things and making things look more authentic to the official art and all that stuff. Like the things that are causing any issues at all is usually like things where I didn't bridge the gap to the point where there's details that I needed to add in that I couldn't even add in because I might have to cut some of those out, because when I tried to bridge the gap back to an area across like a span of area, because I didn't build it out across slowly, and which would have made it easier, what happens is like, oh, I ran out of room. There was like extra folds and clothes, or there was maybe not folds and clothes, but like if it's a robot with machinery, or mechanical stuff, like there's things that, could have, or just anywhere. This thing, like there's strands of hair I should have drawn that didn't get drawn because I didn't slowly build out the entire structure, which would allow me to place those later on if those strands of hair were extra details, right? But slowly building everything across, almost like a typewriter, if you wanted to put it like that, where everything is getting addressed equally, and then it makes it easier for everything to come out the way it should, I guess. Now, you don't have to follow that, but that is an easy way to do it, because you're literally paying attention to every little thing you do, whether it's basic structure or detail, and getting it correct all the way across, slowly building out, and that attention to detail is helping you construct something the way you would probably want it to appear, or the way you're intentionally trying to make it appear. You're probably going to do a better job of that, literally, because you're on purpose trying to pay attention to it by taking your time and building things out slowly, right? So that's really just common sense, obviously. Like if you take your time doing something and you're trying to pay attention to every little thing about you doing it correctly as you're doing it, not that you have to do that with everything, but if you literally only do stuff like that, you're just going to end up getting better at the thing faster and having a higher chance of getting the thing correct, because you're literally just eliminating all the potential issues or mistakes you could make, because you're literally not allowing it to get glossed over. So you're gonna address something if you're not allowing something to get glossed over. And then as long as your checklist of what you're trying to address is correct, we are probably just gonna end up getting it way more correct, which means you're actually improving faster, right? Or you're performing better, and those better performances stacking up is just gonna lead to you just being better. Blah 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 blah. All this extra, maybe not extra. Maybe that was exactly what I need to say, but read restating the same thing multiple different times in different ways sometimes, right? Uh, okay. Now I'm constructing. Once the foundation is established, I can begin building the details. Now I'm constructing the torso and shoulders. The pose has some perspective, so I'm paying attention to it. Which forms move closer to the viewer. Perspective is one of the areas I've been focusing on recently. I'm now moving into the head shape and facial features. Genos has a very recognizable design, so the proportions need to be accurate. Next, I'm building out the robotic arms and details. One thing about Genos is, so I've talked about personality in different shows. Let's see if I can, I guess, summarize how personality comes across in this show, because that could be important to know, like, if you want to construct the character, right? Now, who would be a person who right off the bat you could say they have a personality that's recognizable? You could say One Punch Man, and I forget his name, Saito. He has a bald head because he's worked out so much that he's lost his hair. Not that I'm not saying that that's like an actual thing or whatever, unless people want to get into the science of like stress levels or whatever causing receding hairlines, and if that has to do with men balding, I don't know. Like that's a genetic thing as well, so that may not apply to everybody the same way. Or I don't know enough, but that's not even have to do with what I'm talking about. But the thing is, they use that as a point of humor in the show. So what happens is there's some animes like that where it has something to do with the physical domain, could be highly likely martial arts related. Like, for example, Baki the Grappler. That's like a funny show, but there's actually quite a few shows, but I can't remember a lot of the names. And I don't know if a lot of them will be recognizable. There was another one called, if we're talking about humorous shows where people mastered high levels of martial arts, there was another one called, it was a show about food. And the show kind of reminded me of JoJo, which I never got way too much into that, but I understand a lot about it. And I've seen some episodes. And I've even read part of a manga before, and might have even read it in Shonen Jump if I remember correctly, if that was in Shonen Jump, but I can't remember that. Like, probably went to a Barnes and Nobles like in my teenage years, or in my early 20s, and might have read some stuff, like if I happen to be there, right? But what happens is, in that JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, that's another example, like, where it's humorous. It's like people taking things to such a high level that it's actually funny. Like, these guys took like martial art, like they're all martial arts masters, and this is me just like not actually having heard someone explain the lore too much, but just like from what I've seen and would understand, or how I describe it. They're all martial arts masters. They mastered it to a level that they don't even use physical combat. They fight in a different dimension. You could call it like the astral plane, right? So like they'll literally they have a thing called a stand, and they fight with this thing that's like in a different dimension that has mystical powers or whatever, but it's so powerful that the thing can affect like the real world. So they fight with literally astral projections of themselves. Like, and then it's funny because it's like, it's just funny that they took things are at such a high level. And I'll put it like this: the humor is based on that, right? Or like, for example, in Baki the Grappler, it's people are it's there's a plot line and there's a reason why everything's happening, but it's just funny because people will get so strong, and then you'll see them in like their physical combat encounters, and they're just doing like the craziest things that like maybe somebody who's very, very like into martial arts and martial arts animes or content. Maybe they've seen or heard things like these things, but to the average person who hasn't been exposed to a lot of that stuff, which is probably most people, even somebody who's like into combat, they laugh and be like, wow, this person did something that was extraordinary just to avoid losing, or just to avoid getting hit, or just to handle the scenario this way or that way. And it's just funny because like these people had taken the thing to such a high level that they're having to use levels of warfare that people, it just sounds funny to explain it. Like something that sounds too ridiculous, it sounds funny, right? Or something that sounds like it's at such a high level, it sounds funny. Like people could joke about it because of how impressive it is, right? So what happens is in One Punch Man, they have that same thing where it's basically without having to get too much into the show, it's the stereotypical. I say stereotypical because they could use this on repeat in so many different shows because it's a staple of how something works. But this person had stuck to a strict regimen of working out every single day, regardless of how they felt. The workout was for a level of volume that the average person's not going to do easily. Like they'd have to build into that, and it'd be very stressful. But what happens is like he did that for like over a year, if I remember correctly, and he became very, very strong or whatever. And it's like the same idea. It's the same understanding of like somebody who understands exercise physiology. Not that this is the best way to do this, but this guy built up so much joint and ligament strength that like and they didn't say he trained boxing, but if somebody built up an extraordinary amount of joint and ligament strength through, you know, calisthenics and the running and all that stuff, and you know, all the slow twitch muscle fibers and the causing even he's building up force production and muscle fibers and joint and ligament strength, and it's to the point where when he throws a punch, he can defeat anything in one punch, right? That's the whole concept. That's a real life thing, but the way to train to actually have a type of capability like that in real life would appear different. But they're talking about an understanding of something that can actually happen in the body, and then exaggerating it by saying like this person is beating super mutants and aliens from outer space who are way beyond what humanity could ever handle, even with like a warfare machinery or whatever. Like he's defeating monsters. He's literally doing all this stuff for fun because he built up all this ability and all this strength, right? And he loses his hair, and he acts as is it like there's probably different reasons why he does this stuff, but he goes and fights the villains to save the world or save his city or save people. He does it more for fun and because he's like up for the challenge or whatever, because he's become so strong that now nothing can like challenge him anymore or whatever. Like, so any physical altercations is no challenge. Probably has no trouble with anything physical. So if he had to run to catch a bus or just attempted to do anything, it's all easy to him. And that's cool and all. Like, I'm not sure if somebody would get bored if they had that in real life, but like this is a show showing a perception of a specific person who's went through this, and it's portraying that he's now having fun going and being a superhero for fun, and he's defeating everything in one hit. So his personality is that, like, from what I remember, not remembering way too much about his interactions, but he's very calm, very chill, relaxed, and you know, he sees a video game he likes, he'll want to enjoy and play that. He sees a challenge, like somebody needs to get saved. He knows he's capable of doing it, and he wants to know if it would take him more than one punch to win, to knock out the bad guy, right? So that's like his whole thing is like he's like mastered life or went to the max level, and that he's just doing after missions for fun, like looking to see if there's anything that can entertain him, whatever. Because if anything, he seeks it. He doesn't. A person doesn't have to seek entertainment through conflict or things that are difficult. They could just find things that they genuinely like. But that's just his thing, right? So that his personality is kind of like he's calm, relaxed, and chill, and just kind of like wandering around looking for things to do and succeeding with flying colors because he's already underwent this training, but he's continuing to look. Now, Geno's personality, from what I remember, he's So when I talked about his personality a little bit, or his facial structure, and how it's recognizable. From what I remember, he actually acts just like a robot. So I forget his origin. Was he created as a cyborg, or was he a human who, went through some type of Inspector Gadget or RoboCop type thing where a person got blown up and then they got kept alive by the scientists in the hospital working together to make this guy into a cyborg. So I forget Geno's origin or whatever. And I could have just looked into that real quick before speaking on this. But from what I remember, he acts like a robot. Like, he thinks very logically and level-headed, and just and he's cool and chill. But like, I don't remember him ever expressing himself. Like, I remember very vaguely, and I don't even remember if this is exactly how it could have been worded or played out, but something like One Punch Man, or Saito I should say, he was gonna go save some people from like a villain who was destroying the city or wreaking havoc or something like that. And before he leaves, so he puts on his costume, whatever, because it's funny, he's putting on a costume to be a superhero, even though he's a civil. He's doing it for fun, right? And he goes and asks Genos. He sees Genos as like his friend, and the guy is like a cyborg robot. And he goes and asks him, "Oh, would you like to come help me?" And the guy's like, "Oh yeah, sure." But he doesn't say that with like emotional tonality. He says that like a robot that's void of emotion. It's not negative. It's not positive. It's literally just monotone. Like, if somebody was programming a robot to like, when people say ask Siri to respond, she has a very void of emotion voice tonality that they just answer the question simply in the way that they're programmed to answer. And that's how Genos answered, but like, it was a male voice instead, right? Because he's like a male like cyborg or robot. So I remember him asking Genos to help, and then they go and start fighting the thing, and Genos is like, literally, it's just funny. The whole humor of the show, and here's where the sarcasm comes in. Genos, he's like literally firing laser beams out of his hands, and he's literally jumping, using his mechanical legs to jump like hundreds of feet in the air, and he's firing like there's fire coming out of his feet so he could hover in the air for extra time and fly around, and he's trying to like dodge lasers from the enemy while firing lasers back, and it looks really cool. It looks like a battle where he's dodging the attacks and trying to fire back, and he almost got hit by an explosion and then blows up a building, and it's just like crazy. And then One Punch Man, he comes in and hits the enemy one time, and then they just get destroyed. So all that stuff that Genos was doing is funny because he was engaging in combat the way he was supposed to be able to basically, he was engaging in combat in a manner like a skillful soldier to try and preserve his life and trying to defeat the target. And he's almost gets destroyed doing that, but he's still trying to fight his way through. And then One Punch Man, or Saito, he shows up as a human, and he just punches the thing one time and destroys it. So that's the humor in it, is that it's just ridiculous because you see there's actually other superheroes or people who have abilities, and they'll try their best to do something, but Saito can handle it the same thing with one punch, and he'll just show up and end the fight very quickly, which will end up saving the heroes who almost didn't win the fight or whatever, and save the humanity and all this stuff. So that's kind of where the humor is with that, right? But I notice he doesn't have emotion or personality characters in the show don't really have emotion and personality. They have like intention. That's what I'll say. So Saito's or Saitama, is that it? I forget. His intention is he wants to be a hero. He wants to save people. He's looking for things to entertain him, and he's living like a normal life for himself. But his life is on easy mode because he's become too powerful, right? So everything for him is easy, and the humor of the entire show is based off of that. Because it's easy for him regardless of what he's going through, including having to save the world from a alien who's trying to destroy it, literally, and he wins with one punch. That just sounds funny, right? And then Genos' personality is he's like literally just his comrade or friend that he tries to ask to go on missions with him here and there. And I forget all the details on that, but that's just from like the very little bit that I can remember in like what I've seen. He'd ask him to help, so they try to help each other. And One Punch Man usually wouldn't need his help. It'd usually be he might be holding off until One Punch Man gets there and just ends it in one hit, right? Um, but yeah, also, so Genos, he doesn't have like, from what I remember or what I rate, is he has dark circles around his eyes. That's like machinery, flesh under his like eye sockets on his humanoid facial skin, and he doesn't really have eyebrows or make facial expressions. So those are also things that show that he's like void of emotion as well, right? So I can't really say anything about his emotions. He's just a robot. Okay, so next I'm building the robotic arm details. When drawing mechanical parts, I try to think about structure first and detail second. This helps prevent the drawing from becoming confusing. As the sketch develops, I'm checking proportions and adjusting areas that feel off. Every drawing goes through multiple correction stages. Now I'm strengthening important lines and cleaning up rough construction details. Okay, I just lost my place. Excuse me on that. All right, I'm just gonna re-say this part. So now I'm strengthening important lines and cleaning up rough construction marks, not details. But you could say, similar, right? Looking at the finished piece, I'm happiest with the perspective and character recognition. Next thing I want to improve is hand construction and depth. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next drawing video.